Um, so yeah, we will basically go through what we do in BuildBuddy. I use the same template as the past two teams, so there's not going to be too much different. It will be interesting to see if you guys spot anything that we do differently, because I'd like to think we've got quite a good Scrum process with the team. So I'll just fly through it, keep it nice and short and sweet. So our team, BuildBuddy, we've got the 3 developers. We've got Dida on the back end, and then Valentino and myself that do the front end stuff. Charlotte is our resident designer. Our Scrum Master has been Rachel, well, since I've joined, but we're transitioning to Ivanka taking over that role. And our client at BuildBuddy is David, and he also has 2 investors. Just want to check everyone can hear my mic okay and everything's fine. Yeah, cool.
Yes.
Agile framework we use, no surprises, Scrum, and we pretty much do 2 weeks every time. It'd be a very rare occasion where we will do a 1-week sprint. Usually it's towards the end of a project and we've only got little things to tidy up, basically. The main meetings we have, when it comes to design, we actually have 2 different meetings. We have an internal one with the team and Charlotte, and also an external one. And this basically helps us finalize the designs before we show them to the client, essentially, because there's been times where we've shown a design to the client and then one of the developers has spotted something that either needs changing or it's less feasible or we've got a different option. So what we always tend to do is discuss this with ourselves. And, you know, Charlotte's brilliant in as much that she's open to different suggestions, and she can also guide Valley and I on what the best user experience will be as well. And then we have an external one where we show the client the designs. Estimation, this table that we were on about, I don't know if this is big enough here, but this is what we tend to use. And I'll get Rachel to add it into the Slack.
I did already.
Oh, brilliant. One step. And this is why she's such a great project manager. So yeah, this is what we use. We kind of know this by heart now. So we can tell by thinking about the complexity. Like, for example, if it's a standard Redux flow, as Valley and I call it, we know we've got to do certain things, and we know that's usually a 5. So when we talk about relative estimations, we're not using time periods. We're not going to say this is going to take an hour or this is going to take 3 days. We're using complexity. So an 8 is going to take us more time than a 5, but that's not always the case. Sprint planning, we sometimes do the estimation and the sprint planning together. Just depends on how much estimation there is. So for example, on BuildBuddy, we've gone through the whole project, all the tickets in the MVP, and we've estimated all of those. So that took us 2 hours pretty much. So we split that meeting up. I just realized my camera's not on either, but you probably don't need it. Sprint planning, yeah, this is something which I think we may do slightly differently. Is we know as a team what we can deliver on average per sprint. So once we estimate, we know how many tickets to put in that sprint, give or take a few. This is something that I think Valentino started doing a while back, is he basically looked at how many points we were delivering on average each sprint, and then that gave us almost like a threshold. So one of the things that we'd like to think we do quite well is the sprint planning aspect, which I think, you know, was mentioned in the last meeting. It might be where teams are struggling. Maybe it's not on the estimation side, but that's how we tend to do our planning. Daily Scrum, we keep nice and simple, just what you're doing, what you're up to. Do you need anything from anyone else? Is it blocked? Backlog grooming isn't something we've done as much on BuildBuddy, but we did do it a bit in Helios, our previous project, mainly just to remove any irrelevant user stories, because it just looks a bit untidy and it can be a bit overwhelming if you've got loads of tickets in the backlog, but the reality is you're never going to need to develop those. Demos we do obviously at the end of each sprint, and that's with the client. David invites the investors. They don't always attend, but it's quite cool when they do, because then they can see the progress that the project's making. The retro can sometimes be done directly after the demo. And yeah, I think we all know the importance of that meeting. I personally love the retros. One thing we have done slightly differently as of late is invite the client into the retros. But I'll go on to that later on in the presentation. Project management tool is obviously Jira. Definition of done. This might vary from different teams, but what we started doing with BuildBuddy is adding some automated tests. In our previous project, we were doing everything manually, which worked. It was great. It was very thorough. But this obviously, I say it saves you a bit of time. You obviously got to write the tests as well. So this is something we're starting to do in BuildBuddy is we have just basic jest tests just to make sure everything's rendering and it's not crashing. We then do a code review. So Valley and I tend to do sort of the front end stuff between us. So when one of us finishes a ticket, we pass it to the other one. Well, we make a pull request, and I probably should have done a screenshot of our Jira, but basically we've, after in progress, we have a code review column, then a QA column, and then done. So we've got 2 steps, basically. It's look at the code. Does anything need changing there? Once that gets passed back, we move it into the next column, which is the QA. And what we'll do is whoever owns the ticket will just write a quick, I guess it's an acceptance criteria. When you click this should happen. Also, as part of that QA, the other developer will just have a quick fiddle and almost try and break it, see if there's any bugs that one of us has overlooked. And then before we merge into any sort of CI/CD pipeline, we always at least have a try and break it session. We'll say, right, here's the new release ready to be released. Let's just honestly just clicking about trying to break it and make stuff go wrong. This is the best way to find random bugs. And that means that by doing that testing first, we don't then demo it to the client or give it to the client and let them find the bugs. Sometimes we actually do that though. We'll say, this is the release, try and break it. If you can, let us know. Then we add the bugs to the backlog, and then they get incorporated into the next sprint. Okay, in terms of what we do, Al, firstly, I want to say these are my opinions, but I have shared this with my team. They've added a few comments, but they, if you guys still want to add anything, just holler. So what do we do while in BuildBuddy? I think the internal meetings definitely help because it means we're all singing from the same page when we show stuff to the client. It just looks a bit more professional, essentially. In our estimations, we're very pessimistic. If we're unsure about something, is it a 5? Is it an 8? We'll say, just give it an 8. That tends to work most of the time, because if you estimate it pessimistically, a lot of the time it will take less time to do. But because you've planned that it could take a bit longer, one of the bonuses is, if you finish quicker, great. But if you don't end up being in the shit, basically, because you've said, oh, this is only a small ticket. And that's something I think I've learned personally, is sometimes in a stand-up, I've said, yeah, I'm doing this ticket today. That'll be done in the next hour or so. And I know as soon as I've said that, something's going to happen and it'll take me 2 days. So it's being aware of what you promise, because then you kind of have other people have their expectations, and you're better off trying to avoid any of those expectations, in all honesty. So we are deliberately very pessimistic. But then that also means, like I say, we can over deliver. So it's not uncommon for us to stick to our average velocity per sprint, but most of the time we'll deliver another 10, 15 points on top of that. But it's better to do it that way rather than to say, oh yeah, we'll do 40 points this sprint and then end up delivering 12 because something went wrong. Right. We also keep things lean. And by that, I mean, we're, as a team, and also not just with the designer, but also with the client, we're really trying to keep it MVP basically and focus on just the must-have features. And we push back on the nice-to-haves. We can add them to the backlog. What is this feature vitally important for the application to work and do what it's supposed to do? If not, we'll push it back, or we'll just not even create a user story for it, maybe. So I think this is one of Valentino's phrases, which I love, is the best code is no code. So I sometimes feel bad saying this, because it's almost like it sounds like I'm being lazy because I don't want to spend time doing this, but it's more efficient, because then the team can basically develop more user stories quicker, get to the MVP point, then they can test the product and test the business proposition and the value that the product has. So I don't want that to be misconstrued as, you know, being lazy or obnoxious and not wanting to do any work. Sprint planning. Yeah, I mentioned this before. We don't overload the sprint. So we know roughly what our velocity is. Valentino and I know ours. Dida's starting to get an idea of what hers is. So she knows how many points roughly she can deliver per sprint. And also, I think a vital thing to mention here is it doesn't matter if we don't deliver in that sprint. I think that's something when I first joined, and actually it happened to me the other week. I was worried I wasn't going to finish my ticket in time for the sprint, but there isn't. Valentino and Rachel, you know, they remind us that, you know, even if it doesn't get done by that sprint, it'll just get done like the day after. So it's a good psychological safety to know that if you don't finish those tickets in the sprint, you're not going to be in trouble, or someone, you know, no one's going to chase you up and say, well, you said you were going to do this and you didn't. And then what we do again with the over deliver is if we finish all our tickets in time, we'll start picking up ones from the next sprint, which then gives us a bit of a head start. Ted actually mentioned here what he suggested, which is something we don't do. We tend to just hammer on, is do some pair programming together. So that was something Ted suggested. If you finish all your tickets before the sprint. As again mentioned before, we've got a really good system, Valley and I, because I guess we've been working together almost a year. We came up with a system. It's almost like tennis. It's like I finish the ticket, I smash it over the net to you. You have a play with it. And you say that's not quite right. Try this. He smashes it back. So we play a bit of tennis, and not many bugs slip through that. And that's a really good process that we've got sorted. And
I interject, Sam?
Yeah, sure.
No, I just want to say about this one that as a project manager, yeah, it's great working with Valley and Sam because we worked on a project before, because I know that when you say something's done, it's really done and it's unlikely to break, and it's unlikely that the client will then sort of test it and say, well, you've forgotten something really obvious, or there's this obvious bug or whatever. And that's just, it's really nice to have confidence in your team and know that you're delivering a really good quality product. So yeah, I just wanted to have that.
That's brilliant. And I'd like to thank Valentino for that, because he's got very high standards. Like if there's something minor that needs changing that may come back and bite us in the bum later on, he'll mention it and almost won't approve the ticket until it's done, which I think is brilliant, because there's a part of me before I would have, been a developer, I'd have been like, don't worry about it. It's a minor thing. Let's just crack on. But it's, we're kept to those high standards. So that, again, it helps us as a team because we don't have to worry about stuff that comes back and bites us in the bum. And we have fun as a team. Like it's quite funny. Some of the stand-ups, if you turn up late and you join in on a conversation, you'll wonder what on earth is going on. And I think we're lucky. I think, we've got a good level of banter, as we call it in English. And it means that we're comfortable just having fun and messing around, but we're also we're all very good at our jobs. So we found that good balance, because obviously sometimes you can get people that are funny, but they're not very good. And sometimes you can get people that are really good at their job, but they're pretty boring or they're a dick. And I think we've got a nice balance in the team. And I think that gives us psychological safety almost, because we feel comfortable making jokes, and it's like self-deprecating humor, but that counts towards that psychological safety and feeling vulnerable when you need assistance or something hasn't quite worked out or there's a bit of pressure going on. And as well as being fun team members, everyone's flexible and open to suggestions and changes, and that's everyone in the team. It's not just the developers and the designers. We can even include our client in this. We've had a few sort of discussions lately where they've wanted certain functionality, and we've explained the complexity of it, and we've just found a different solution which was better for both of us. So everyone is open to suggestions, and it's almost like we encourage them. It's almost, no one ever says this is how we're going to do it and we're not going to change our mind. So that I think is really important, because it enables us to just progress without any animosity or tension. It's not like, I really wanted to do that and I hate that person because they didn't let me do this feature and yada, yada. We're pretty organized. We've got our meeting schedule. We use the Google Drive quite well. The Jira and the backlog are very well pruned. what else is there? Yeah, and also what what Zyda was mentioning earlier, that the actions, you can have a good retro and you can come up with some great ideas and realize, oh yeah, we're not going to do that next, we're going to do it differently next sprint. And I'd imagine a lot of retros around the world have those realizations, but then don't do anything about it. And I can pretty much say that everything we've ever come out with in a retro, we've actually changed. And it's really cool to see the process. And that's kind of how the Helios team got so efficient, is because of those retros. We realized what wasn't working. We tried a different way, and we got those systems and those flows working across the whole team, including the client and our contact point with the client. Okay, almost there, guys. What can be improved? Yeah, this one, it's probably less about Scrum, but I'm thinking in terms of our team is we've got a client, but we've also got investors. And sometimes we organize stuff and we plan stuff with the with the client, but then the investors see it and then they'll have some input as well. So it's still quite a new project. We haven't quite got that right yet, knowing at what point do we allow these potential changes of direction and plan. But again, it's a new thing, and I'm sure we'll figure it out. And part of that is obviously managing the client expectations. I think our client hadn't done a software project before, so didn't really have any idea on how long anything took. So even something as simple as the login page probably took us, it took us at least 1 or 2 sprints. But then you also have to explain to them, well, yeah, we've also got to initialize the project, add in all of those libraries that we're going to need for everything else, like setting up Redux Toolkit. That took ages. So, I give props to the client as well, because he's really starting to see how long things do take in software. Because I think they initially came in with a whole app basically and said, right, can you build this? Can you do it by September? And we were like, no, we can build a small part of it, but we don't know which part. But we're really finding that, and it's just communication. It's communicating to the client and the investors, look, if you want this done, this is how long it's probably going to take. Because without that, they're going to expect it to be delivered, and the team's going to be under pressure. Or it's good to almost have that psychological safety with the client and be open and transparent to say, just reduce or remove as many expectations as possible. Because one thing I'm finding in the software development world is things can change in an instant, and there's so many variables you can't see. Even if you think, yeah, I'm going to develop this thing, there'll be some sort of bug or something will happen that you can't predict. Okay, so that's what we're improving at the moment on BuildBuddy. Tools we use, something called Hatjitsu. We haven't used this for a while, but what it essentially is it enables people to make their estimations, but not be influenced by anyone else in the team. So it's almost like poker. It's like everyone has their estimate. There's like 3 cards, and then it's a bit like the Metro Retro. And then at the end, everyone flips the cards, and you see, oh, someone put a 3, someone put a 5, someone put an 8, and then you can explain it. We haven't used that one in a while, but that's quite a useful tool. Obviously, then Jira, we use the epics and the roadmap a lot. Now, epics are basically just a collection of user stories, but when you come to the roadmap, which I think I've put down here, see I don't know how small this is on your screens, but all of our tickets are put into epics. So there'll be maybe 20 tickets in the design epic, 5 in the auth, and so on and so on. So it's almost like they're collections of user stories. With the roadmap then, because what we've done is we've gone through and estimated everything. So we know that it's going to take us basically 11 sprints to finish off all these tickets. And you can also see a progress bar on the epics. So yeah, I don't actually know what these are, but yeah, that we use the epics and the roadmap. The roadmap, I think, is something Ivanka brought in. We hadn't used it previously, but it was a really good way of showing to the client, right, these are all the tickets that you want us to do. we've managed them roughly per sprint, and it's going to be done by sprint 11, which is end of November. So it gives them a ballpark figure that's a bit more realistic than, you know, it could take 3 months, it could take 6 months. We don't really know. All right, let me get my screen back. Is this changing on your screens as well, the size?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, okay, I'll keep it bigger then probably. Google Drive, yeah. Metro Retro board, which I think most of the teams may use. If you haven't, it's worth looking at. So what tips would we give from our team? This one, yeah, keep organized to ensure that the user stories and the designs, and probably less so the back end. I mean, I was thinking about this in a dream world. If as a developer, I would want everything to be there ready when I start developing. This isn't realistic, basically, especially on a new project where the front end and the back end are starting at the same point. I think what I've realized is we were spoilt a bit in our previous project where the back end was already built, and we just, you know, whenever we picked up a ticket, we would go to Swagger. We knew exactly what we needed to send, what we expected back, and it was there. But having the user stories and the designs and having those meetings almost 2 weeks ahead means that they can be finalized and approved by the time it comes to development. And in our team, we've called it pushing it upstream. Again, it's not always possible, but in the dream world, we like to have Charlotte working 2 weeks ahead of us so she can do all her work rather than us sort of sat there waiting for, you know, give us the designs, give us the stuff we need to start working. So that's something we try and do if possible, but we're also not, you know, we don't put other teammates under pressure if we're waiting. We're just going to do another ticket, or we can do the ticket up to a point that we can do. As I mentioned before, know your average sprint velocity. And this can really help you with your planning, because if you know on average what you can do, you know roughly how many points to put in the sprint. And that also then manages expectations both on your team members and also, you know, your client. Something which I'm sure a lot of you do already is if you've got a whole bunch of meetings, try and just put them in one day or one afternoon or in a block. Can be a bit tiring, but it then means you've got, you know, free, you know, focus days to do development or your work. A little trick that we do, hang on, my mouse has stopped, is we use the stand-up room for any sort of chats that we need during the day. So rather than going into Slack, creating a Hangout, starting the Hangout, posting that link back in Slack, we just say SU, jump in the SU. So we just go back to the link from the morning and just go in there. It saves you a couple of minutes a day. This one as well, be transparent with the client. Like I said, this is something we've only just started doing. From a developer point, I was a bit hesitant to do this, if I'm honest, because a lot of the time we're talking about the client. That's the bottom line. Is like we're getting, you know, we have thoughts and emotions around the client and what they're doing, and this is the client in general, not necessarily our client. So I was slightly hesitant, but I'm really happy we've started doing this now, because that transparency really helps you develop as a team. And what Charlotte mentioned earlier is you then start to understand why people do certain things. So having our client as part of that, the retros, we understand where he's coming from a lot of the time, which then it gives us a better position to know how to, you know, what to do going forward. Because if you don't have those conversations with the client, then you might get a bit frustrated, or you might think, well, why do they want to do this? But then sometimes once you find out why they're doing things, you can realize, oh, okay, well, either that makes sense, or, oh, right, no, he doesn't have to do that. He might have some wrong information. And you can say, well, we can just do this instead. And that's what we've really started doing, is building up that rapport with the client. And he's really starting to see, he's starting to embrace the agile process, which means that, you know, you can change things and iterate and learn from it. Right, we are near at the end. These three I put in bold. These are my favorite ones, and probably the most important ones I'd like to finish on. And it leads on from being open and honest with your client, but also with your team. So this is, I guess it's done in the one-to-ones, but we also do it in our stand-ups. Is the more open and honest you are, the the more likely a solution is going to be delivered. And I think having that team rapport means you can have that safe space to say, you know, I'm struggling with this, or I need help with this, or I don't think this is going to work. We're all open to listening to that person, and we're never going to shut them down, or, you know, tell them to shut up, do it, and, you know, get on with it. This one again, make the required changes after each retro. Don't just write it down, go and do the stuff. And this one is it's more something I've sort of adopted just from my coaching days, really. But I think it's something that the agile process, it's almost instilled in, but probably doesn't get mentioned, is there's no such thing as failure, only free data. And by that, it means that if something goes wrong in the sprint, look at it as information you can use to improve the next sprint. So just reframe it from a failure or a fuck up, and use that as free data that you've gained that you can improve next time. And I think that is pretty much the end of my presentation. Open to any questions or comments or thoughts or jokes.